Hey guys, UnoPro here, back with our final part of our patch analysis for 1.96. We've had to split up into 3 parts because of life commitments, but we're going to finish it now. So we just have Vanar and our neutral cards remaining. I do apologise, at the end of part 2 there was 2 minutes of audio missing. I don't really think that's worth redoing, so we're just going to go straight to Vanar. It was just one card we missed, so that should be fine. Let's get into it straight away and finish this off. So first card was Aspect of Shimzar, which is now a 3 mana spell which transforms any minion into a random battle pet. This was originally 2 mana cost, it's been nerfed. Pretty significant nerf. I'm not sure how good it would have been at 2 mana. I think it could have been viable. Maybe with stuff like Gravity Wells. I have to really have a good look at the battle pets. But now at 3 mana, I'm not expecting this to be good. And I really hope it's not good. I don't think this is a card that really is healthy for the game. Too much randomness. It's fine as a fun card, and that's why they probably have nerfed it just to make it a fun card, and that's fine. I don't mind random abilities on fun stuff, but when they're competitive and this random, it gets a bit of an issue. So I think this is a good change. I'm happy with it. Don't expect to see much competitive play. Pretty simple, that one. And next one is Essence Sculpt. So this was originally 1 mana, now it's 0 mana. It's a spell which says choose a stun minion, put a copy of that card into your action bar. Now, the difference between 0 and 1 is pretty massive, and if you're already in a deck that wants to be stunning things, it's quite likely that you want this. There's really not much cost. As long as you can really be stealing stuff you want to, it basically cycles itself, it replaces itself when you stun, and it really just is a matter of, do you want the options to steal your opponent's minions, which is quite possibly good. Like, it's good against Mercantor. There's often really powerful in-faction minions that you don't have access to that you would want in your deck, and this is basically no cost to you if you're consistently stunning. So with the stun general, I actually don't know her name, I always forget. Obviously this is something that could see some play if you're just going to be stunning in your natural gameplay anyway. Obviously I don't think it will see much play outside of that deck, but I could definitely see this as a fine card if you find that you often want threats, and it does allow that deck to kind of go a little bit less heavy on their threats, which is something they kind of want to do because they want to be more controlling. And you have this flexibility now where this kind of card can kind of serve as an early drop slot or as a finisher. You have the options, and that's kind of why the flexibility is good. You don't need to run one of each, an early game card and a finisher. So maybe this card could see some play. I don't think it's terrible. It's 0 mana. 0 mana card that draws immediately effectively is always going to be a consideration. So definitely could be good. Pretty significant buff there. Frigid Corona. So Frigid Corona was a very good card. Only change to it is now 2 mana, stun an enemy minion, draw a card. It was 2 mana, stun an enemy minion or general. I think this is a decently significant nerf. Because, hitting the general is actually a pretty important thing. So even if you have nothing on turn 1 going first, you can stun their general, stop them going to the mana tile, and that was pretty good. Now you can't do that, which is a pretty big nerf to the card. I think this will still play decks in that want to benefit from the stun abilities, though you really want to be a tempo deck if you're going to be playing this without stun synergy. So maybe if you're playing if you're playing creatures that kind of just want to attack and really want to live and pay off for a turn, maybe this is okay. But I think actually stunning the general is quite a big miss for this card. Especially with a lot of Magmar running around, often what you want to stun is the enemy general. So I think this card is still pretty fine. It'll still see some play for sure, but definitely a lot more limited. I'm expecting to see still some play, but I think it's probably a little bit more of a synergy card now. Ice Age is now our next one we have. So Ice Age was 7 mana spell, summon Blazing Spines all on the outside of the battlefield, and now it's 8 mana. Now this one was very surprising to me. I'm assuming there's some stuff from Denizens of Shimzar that comes in. This card wasn't really seeing much play. It's not very powerful by itself. A 7 mana spell that can really just be walked away from is not that great, though there may be some synergies. I haven't really checked it out. Either way, I think at 8 mana it's going to be very, very hard. 8 mana spells that don't do much by themselves are always going to be pretty terrible. So I'm not really expecting this to see play. Maybe there's some niche deck that wants it, but I'm not really seeing it at 8 mana. So don't think that card will have any impact. Next one is Mana Death Grip, and this is actually a pretty impactful nerf for Vanar. This was one of the strongest cards. So it was 1 mana, deal damage to an enemy minion. If it dies this turn, permanently gain 1 mana crystal. So it can ramp you for 1 mana and also ping. which was really, really good, especially if you're actually killing someone with it by itself and you 1 health minions. This is just so good. You're trading equal in mana, but you're also gaining a mana crystal every turn. That was such a big advantage. Now at 2 mana, it gets a lot more clunky. Maybe it still sees some play in decks that really want to ramp and get to late game. If you're playing some kind of ramp deck with this and Crystal Wisps, it gives you some redundancy to an extent. Though I don't think this is a card you just slam into any Vanar lists, which is kind of something that Death Grip was before. I mean, maybe there's some decks that didn't want it, but it was very, very strong, and you need a really good reason not to run it. Now I think you actually want to have a reason to run it. You want to be ramping for a specific purpose rather than just simply, just because it's such a good card. So I think it's a pretty significant nerf. Going from 1 to 2 is always going to be pretty significant, and it's no different here. So we're kind of flying through them today. I think most of these have been pretty obvious so far. Now our next one is very interesting. This is actually an artifact which has gone from 3 mana to 1 mana, and this is the Dredger. And it says, whenever your general damages an enemy, randomly teleport them to your starting side of the battlefield. Now, if you're playing stuff like Avalanche, this could be pretty good. There's not that much other synergy with it, really, because you often want to be on your opponent's side of the battlefield. Avalanche is the main synergy. I'm not really sure if this will see too much play, but I guess if you're infiltrating, it's also like a teleport. So it's like a repulsor beast on an artifact. So it could be really good, and at 1 mana, it's really very flexible. I could definitely see this seeing some play in decks that want to be playing Avalanche. How often you actually want to be doing that is another question. Anytime you see a card go from 3 mana to 1 mana and not see any other changes, you really need to be on the radar for this one. I mean, definitely it was very terrible at 3 mana. I could see it seeing some play at 1 mana now. Like, that's such a massive difference in the mana cost. It could really make a big difference. So maybe you could see some play as like a repulsor beast kind of effect that you're also playing Avalanche. There's some options there, but decently flexible, and at 1 mana you can really kind of fit it into a lot of turns. So it definitely has some potential for sure. Our next one, our last card in Vanar is Wind Sister Maya. So this was a... I can't actually remember the original ability. Now it has 4 mana, 4/5. It was a nerf, I can't remember exactly what it was. But it was... Was it a nerf? I think so, yeah. Well, it's offering changes, yeah. So it's a 4 mana, 4/5 anyway. Friendly minions with Infiltrate have +1/+1. Not really expecting this to see too much play this time around. Now it's back in standard. 4 mana, 4/5 is okay. It's a bit understated. Friendly minions +1 Infiltrate. Yeah, that's kind of okay. Though you're not really playing Infiltrate minions, this makes a massive difference. Like your Cloaker, the 2/3 goes to like becomes a 4/3, becomes a 5/4, which isn't actually that different. Maybe see some play in a deck with lots of Infiltrate minions, but I don't actually think you don't really go any past any general thresholds. What's the 2/1's name? I completely forgot. Snow Chaser, is it? The 2/1 that infiltrates. Making out a 3/2 is often not that impactful because you don't get an extra general hit out of it. Again, going from 3 health to 4, and there's nothing with 2 health that you really want to be playing an Infiltrate deck, I don't think, and this is kind of where that card would shine. So I'm not expecting to see too much play for this. I don't think just Infiltrate is really a build-around mechanic at the moment. Alright, that takes us on to our neutral cards. So we're nearly done. This has been a lot of patch analysis. So Alter X has become a 5/5 from a 4/4. It reads 5 mana whenever you summon Mechazor, put a Mechazor in your action bar. Well, first of all, now that Mechazor can be targeted, it's just much worse. Because, you just don't want to be playing Mechazor. I guess that makes sense in the fact that now you have more reason to want to play this because your Mechazor's not invulnerable. But it's very, very slow. Like, your opponent's going to be able to pressure you early on often because you're trying to play these weak mech cards. You finally get it, but you also have to have 5 mana the turn you play it to play this. Not really seeing this. It's quite slow. And even playing a Mechazor the turn after, you've just played a 5 mana spell that does nothing the turn it comes in, and then you're still playing the Mechazor the turn it comes in, and doing nothing as well. So, I'm not expecting to see this too much play. Maybe as like a one-off, if you're trying to tech against a control meta and really grind them out with the Mechazor. Not something I expect to see too much. Definitely not on the ladder. So next one is Artifact Hunter, which is an interesting buff. It used to be 4 mana, 3/3, opening gambit, draw a random artifact from your deck. It used to actually be 3/5, but then they nerfed it and now they buffed it up a little bit. And there's actually quite a lot of changes like that. This used to be really good with Mask of Shadows. Draw a Mask of Shadows and like Jux, and that's 6 mana. You kill anything and get a board on the body on the board and have an artifact developed. This was like the old Sci-High days, and now Mask of Shadows is better again. I could see this seeing maybe some play, and we have Crescent Spear back in. So in like artifact decks like Songhai, this could definitely see some play. In Sarge, maybe we'll see some play as well. Though really doing anything special with the artifact is a little bit harder because, say you get a Staff of Yukia. If you want a Bloodborne spell with that as well, then that's 7 mana, and 6 and 7 mana is quite a big difference. I think Sarge should probably just prefer to run another artifact in this place, as they really just want to get their artifacts. They really value their mana in the early turns because often they're playing Trial, they want to get to the other side, and they just want to play artifacts. And I think playing minions that draw artifacts is probably not the best. Especially because they're not really fighting for the board with minions. Next one is Astral Crusader. So, Astral Crusader now says whenever you replace this card, I can't remember, was it +1? I believe it was +1 and -1 cost, which was pretty terrible. Now, whenever you replace it, it costs 3 less and gains +3/+3. And it's a 7 mana 7/6. So, if you replace it once, it's actually a 4 mana 10/9. Maybe this card actually could see some play. If you actually replace it and get it, it's really, really good. And if you replace it twice, which is probably not happening, I think you kind of always just treat this card as a 4 mana 10/9 after you replace. Maybe it's fine. I don't know if you really want to build a replace deck though, where this would really shine. But maybe there's decks that just kind of have Aether Masters naturally, and they're like pretty good, like an Arcanist or something. And you can benefit from that. Or maybe you just play this in a deck where there's a lot of redundancy. You don't really need to be replacing a lot. I guess that could be something like a Wanderer deck you don't often need to replace with, because you'll kind of have like minions that play it on curve. So maybe this is fine, games go late, but obviously in a Wanderer deck you kind of want to, it's a one of, you need to find the one of and replace it, so maybe it's not that good there. Definitely think this card has a lot of power. Replacing it once and drawing into it is good, but the chances of drawing into it are still pretty low, so I'm not sure it's worth the cost. Again, it's a deck that really doesn't care about replacing too much. Possibly something like Starhorn doesn't really care about replacing too much. Maybe that's an option, though personally not seeing it too much. Wouldn't be surprised if this shows up in a couple decks, or at least gets tried heavily. Yeah, kind of a bit iffy on this card. It could go either way. Definitely has some potential power level. Like a 4 mana 10/9 is pretty good, but it will definitely come out pretty late unless you get pretty lucky. So it might just be Aether Master deck card. Our next one is the Calculator. So, Calculator got changed from 5 mana cost to 4, and it's a minion, 1/1, opening gambit, gain the combined attack and health of all battle pets in your action bar. So if you're playing a battle pet deck, this is actually probably a pretty good card, though I don't think battle pet decks will be good in general. You really don't need a lot of battle pets in hand. 2 in hand that are decently statted, you're definitely getting above the cost for 4 minion, but playing a ball of stats on 5 is actually pretty bad. You can play this turn 2 for a pretty big minion, so I can actually see this seeing some play if a battle pet deck is good. This card is obviously actually very, very powerful in a battle pet deck. The question just becomes, how good is a battle pet deck actually? Obviously this helps, but I think there's still some missing tools, and putting a ball of stats on the board isn't really what that deck is missing. It already has a lot of stats with battle pets inherently. So next one is Duelyst. I don't think this card really got hit too hard by a nerf. It did lose. Let me just get the card up. So it was a 4 mana 5/3 that used to summon a 0/10 provoke near your general on death. Now the provoke is just 0/8. This card was very, very good, and I think it is still very, very good. It basically performs the same. Often, if your opponent's putting 10 damage into the provoke, it's often really good for you anyway. It means, in a good situation. So I don't think having 2 less health really makes that big of a difference. I think this card will still see lots of play. It's really good in Dying Wish decks. Obviously not as strong, but I think something like Divine Bond Liner, it's still pretty good. I think this card is still very, very solid and a good defensive option at the 4-drop. Alright, our next card is EMP. So EMP was a card that actually was seeing a lot of play as a 9/9. Now it's 7 mana 7/7 with Opening Gambit, Dispel all minions and generals, and Destroy all artifacts. Now I think this card kind of goes away from just being a generic card you put in your deck that's just good, which, you know, a fair bit of decks were running. And now it becomes something where you actually really want the effect. It's kind of a meta call if you're versing a lot of obelisks or even artifacts, maybe. It is quite expensive, and 7 mana 7/7 is pretty bad. So you really want to be benefiting off the effect now. And I think that makes that card still possible in certain metas or as a tech card. But I think in general, it's no longer just a generic good card that you want to have in your deck. Because you're getting bad stats and you really need the effect to be good. So this is now going to be a meta call and a tech card rather than just a generic good card that is pretty good against most things. Alright, now we have Envy Bear or Bayer, and it was a 5 mana 3/7. Now it's a 5 mana 3/10 with the ability, whenever this minion damages an enemy, teleport that enemy to a random corner. Now this card honestly could be quite good now. It's got the same stats as Ironcliff, which is actually pretty relevant. Like 3/10 is a massive stat line. You're often not killing that with generic raw damage, and if they do, and even if they have something live, it's getting teleported to the corners. Could be really good. Wouldn't be surprised if this is play. Maybe there's even defensive Songhais that want to do this and play with Inner Focus. I could definitely see this card seeing some play. Works with Lost in the Desert. Honestly, one of the better 5-drops now. Similar impact to Dancing Blades, better against obviously things that Dancing Blade isn't good against. So kind of a tech card. I mean, a 5 mana minion that doesn't do anything the turn it enters is always going to be a little iffy, because if it gets chucked to position away, you spent 5 mana, they spend 0 mana dealing with it. It also does to Plasma Storm, which is actually pretty relevant. I'm seeing a lot of Magmars with Plasma Storm at the top of the ladder right now. But this card has some potential. I think it could find a home and will definitely show up from time to time. The card is a lot stronger. 3 health buff is very significant. Alright, next one is Grincher. Now, when this card came out, there was a lot of hate for it, but I never really saw much play. And I believe originally when it came out, I did a video on it. It was 50% chance to spawn an artifact that you could actually play on 5 mana. Now, I don't know with all the new artifacts the maths, but obviously making what they've done is it now adds a random action artifact to your action bar, and it costs 3 less, and it's still a 5 mana 5/4. So basically 1 mana less, which is quite similar to this card costing 1 less. It's a little bit worse, but still very good. I could actually see this. We do have stuff like, we do have artifact decks coming back into the meta. Sarge doesn't really care too much what artifact they get. Like, it has synergy with their Trial, and most of them have synergy with the Bloodborne spell anyway. Cyclone Mask is similar, a little bit worse. Like, you do care a bit more. You really just want attack, and there's a couple of good effects. But I can actually see this card seeing some play in some artifact decks. There's more artifact support. There's Artifact Hunter. So I would expect artifact decks to kind of come back in the meta, and they do prey on these Mithron Wanderer decks a fair bit because they're not really running a lot of pings. They have a couple options, but they need to draw them at the right time. They're often playing 1 minion a turn. So I could see some artifact builds in conjunction with the other changes, buffing Mask of Shadows, Artifact Hunter, and a couple of other things. Maybe artifact decks could be a thing, and maybe Grincher finds a slot in there. Costing 3 less could be really good. I think you'd have to probably do the math and see how often you can actually play this on 5, because that makes a massive difference to the power level of the card. If you have to play this on 5 and you can't play the artifact, you just spent 5 mana playing a 5/4, and that is just absolutely terrible. If you can play an artifact that turn as well, it suddenly becomes a much better turn. So you'd have to do the maths and really figure it out, but I could definitely see some potential in this card. Alright, our next card is Hydrax. Let me get that up. So Hydrax is now a 3/4 instead of a 3/3, and it has 3 mana ability, 3 mana, and whenever a friendly battle pet dies, draw a card. Again, I think this is actually pretty solid in a battle pet deck now that it's a 3/4. That's kind of the stat line you want. A 3/3 for 3 is pretty bad unless it has a good effect. So now I think this is fine. Again, I think this is going to be a problem, same as, what was the other card called? Calculator, where it's more of a issue of how good battle pets are rather than an issue of how good the support pieces are. But the support pieces do make the deck. I'm just not really sure this is what they need. Not exactly sure what battle pet decks need, but I still think they might fall a little bit short. Next one is Inquisitor Kron. Now this card, when it came out, was an absolute terror as a 4/6. Oh, how have I spelled it? Okay, there we go. So it was a 4/6. Now it's a 5 mana. Then it got nerfed to a 4/4, and now it's back up to a 4/5. It's a bit of a common theme we've seen. It gets nerfed 2 health and then gains 1 health back. So it's 5 mana 4/5. Whenever you replace a card, summon a 2/2 prisoner with a random ability, and it no longer can produce a minion with Force Field, which I think is a really, really good change. That was one of my biggest problems with the card, is that you can often budget to kill a 2/2, but then a Force Field just changes all the maths. And anytime it's going to be the difference between a minion dying or living, that's a pretty big difference at times. And Force Field, that's just crazy. Like 2/2 Force Field is a really good card. So, yeah. I think this is a great change. 4/5, it could see some play for sure. 5 health is a little bit lower. It dies to stuff like Phoenix Fire or like a 2/3 hit and a Blood Tier. The 6 health does matter, but I think this card still could see some play. Though it does kind of make you want to play it a bit more defensively, which is a little bit awkward with the Provoke. Replace decks has got some tools. This is obviously really good on a replace deck. But yeah, I think I would be playing this a little bit more defensively. You don't want it to die to like a Dancing Blade. And like, if you play Kron, get a 2/2 that's not that good or something, you get Dancing Blades and then they hit your Kron. That's kind of a bad trade for you. They've ended up with 4/6. You got a 2/2 with a random ability, but not the end of the world. So I think Kron could be good, but does need to be played at least moderately defensively a fair bit of the time, I think. Okay, our next one is Lady Locke. So this was a 3 mana 2/2. Now it's a 3 mana 2/3 with Provoke. Other minions you summon this turn gain +1/+1 and gain Provoke. So this was good with Gravity Wells and stuff like that, or similar things. And it did see a little bit of play. I think going from 2 health to 3 health is a massive, massive change. So if there are token decks that want this kind of effect, this is a hell of a lot better and actually could see some play. The difference between 2 and 3 health is just so huge. Less so with a card like this, you want to play safe, but still pretty massive. Also, getting around more and stuff. I think this card could definitely see some play. Alright, next one is Purgatos, which went from a 3/4 to a 3/5. It's a 4 mana card, and whenever you deal damage, whenever the minion deals damage, you deal 3 damage to an enemy general or restore 3 health to your general, and it's random. The randomness still kind of makes this card a little bit less reliable. Could be good in decks like Songhai that want to race. If you inner focus it, it's 6 damage, and will often, if you hit the enemy with it, or restore 3 health to your general, which can be good. Though a lot of the time with Songhai, you'd much rather the 3 damage, and if you get the health, because often the turn you die with Songhai is going to be, you're going to die by a lot more than 3 damage. Like you kind of just get there before you take like 10 damage or something. So I think the inconsistency of the random effect could be a bit too much. But 4 mana 3/5 is not too bad. Like 5 health is a pretty good number. So maybe this sees some play. Thunderhorn did get nerfed. I'm not really sure what's better out of those two. Though I think a lot of the time if you already have enough draw, maybe this takes a Spelljammer slot. Like maybe if you want to play more 3-drops at draw, you could play Purgatos instead of Spelljammer if you think you're in a meta where you want to be drawing yourself rather than the drawing for both players. A bit more of a cost. So maybe see some play. Definitely the card is a lot better than as a 3/4. Gets 2 general attacks in, which is pretty important for sure. Alright, Sanguinar. So this card, how exactly did it work? So it was 4 mana 5/4. Was it a Bloodbound spell? So maybe it was cost 1 less. And now it cost 0. I think it might have been costing 1 less. I can't really remember. But if it does, that doesn't really make a big difference unless you're playing stuff that upgrades your hero power and something that costs more. For the most part, I don't think this is actually going to make a big difference. I mean, it's a nice play on turn. It's still a nice play on turn 4, or when you have 4 mana to play this in thing, but I still don't think it's going to be good enough. Alright, Saboro. So Saboro has gone from a 2/4 to a 3/4. It's a 3 mana minion that whenever this minion damages a neutral minion, destroy that minion. Don't really think it makes that big a difference. It's only really attacking generals that actually makes a difference with this. And I mean, it's okay as a 3/4, but I don't think there's enough neutral minions to really warrant this inclusion. I guess it is good against the Wanderer decks, But again, I don't think the 3-4 actually changes that. So if it wasn't good against them before, I don't think making going from a 2-4 to a 3-4 makes a big difference. But it's a nice little buff. It's good to have these cards with abilities that are on stats, they're on the stat line, so they're good even if their ability is not relevant. Okay, next card is Spriggan. Can its stats change from a 6-6 to an 8-8? It's a 6-mana minion with Provoke and Opening Gambit. Each player summons 3 Spriggan kin nearby their general. Now, I'm not really sure what Spriggan kin are, I will be honest. This card has seen no play, at least in my experience, at the top ranks. I don't think making an 8-8 will change that. I think there's probably more impactful things than getting a neutral effect. I could be wrong about how the Spriggan kin works, but I don't think that will make a difference. Maybe a nice little buff. Obviously, going to an 8-8 is much better than a 6-6, but even a 6-mana 8-8 Provoke is not necessarily a good card, so you need to be benefiting off whatever the Spriggan kins are, which probably seems unlikely. I don't know what they are, but you both get them, so I don't think it'll be too good. Sunsteel Defender is our next one. So it was a 4-mana 4-3 with Force Field. Now it's a 4-mana 3-3 with Force Field. I think this is a pretty significant nerf to the card. The card was very, very good before, and I think now it's no longer really that good by itself. Dealing 4 is a fair bit better than dealing 3. It functions similarly, but I think now this is a card you want to be buffing. And if you're not going to be buffing it, it's no longer good by itself. And it's obviously a lot worse in aggressive decks as well, where that 4 attack was really, really nice for pressuring with the Force Field. So I don't think this will see any play in decks just by itself. But if you have a deck that really can support it, maybe it's still fine. Next one is Thunderhorn. This is probably one of the most impactful changes of the patch. Thunderhorn was basically it was one of the best cards in the game. It was a 4-mana 4-5. Now it's 4-mana 4-4. So it lost a point of health, and whenever it damages an enemy, damages all joined enemies. I'm sure most of you know this card, so I don't really feel the need to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I think this is a pretty significant nerf, though the card is still pretty similar. Often 4 health won't die from range, especially compared not to 4-5, though this lives through, it no longer lives through Rebuke, no longer lives through Mercantle, so much worse against Magma. They have much more ways to answer it now. I think this could still see play in decks that have synergy with it. It's no longer going to see play in decks that don't really have synergy in it. Maybe in Mithron decks, but you can talk about that with a lot of cards. I don't think it's going to see play in just like a random Magmar mid-range deck now. I think it will be stuff like Vitruvian that's running the Blast or giving it flying, or Kalios you can teleport it in, or Songhai in general can teleport it in. I think this becomes more of a synergy card. I don't think you play it just on its body alone. And that's a good thing. I think this is fine as a build-around card and a payoff card, but when it was just being played in every deck, it was just kind of ridiculous at a 4-5. It's a nice nerf. I like the way they've done that. They haven't murdered the card, and it does actually create some interesting situations sometimes, because you can play around in a lot of different ways. Now, the last one is Zix, which was a 1-mana 1-2 that spawned a copy of it nearby on a random space. Now it's 2 mana. This hurts the card a fair bit. Obviously, they brought in some token synergies with stuff like Lady Lock. I think there's a couple other cards. Probably not seeing too much play at a 1-2. It's a fair bit worse than a 2-3. Maybe the see some play in some decks like that want one attack minions, like the Brome Trial, the Lionar Trial, I think it is. But apart from that, I'm not expecting to see too much. So I don't think this card is going to be very good. It wasn't that fantastic before, even when it was 1 mana, and doubling the mana of that is a pretty big nerf. Alright guys, that is enough for now. We've finished our patch analysis. It took us a while, a lot of content, but there was so many changes, and this is on top of all the Shimzar cards coming in, which just changes everything. There was a ton of powerful cards in Shimzar. Everything has changed. I've been experimenting with some Songhai decks. I've still got more ideas, so videos will be coming for that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this. I'll see some new builds and gameplay in S rank with these new cards and see how they go. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.